This video demonstrates how to build a policy management application within Baserow. First of all, let's have a look at our use case. What do I expect from such a system or such an application? First of all, the application must offer a centralized repository for all my policies. I don't want to have PDF documents spread out all over my organization. I want to have them all in a central place. Also, the application must ensure an approval mechanism so that I have a structured approach to either approve or reject the new version of a policy. And finally, I want to have total version control and history. Each change must be documented. In my organization, this is what a policy means. It has a certain structure, being first of all a purpose, which explains why we have a policy. Second, it has a scope that says to who the policy applies. There are the guidelines, which are the actual policies, what is allowed, what is not allowed. There is the non-compliance, so what is the consequence for violating it, and there's the effective date when the policy starts taking place. My approval process is rather simple. It requires one single approver, and he needs to perform a number of checks. For example, is my policy compliant with industry standards, and so on. He also must check if all the feedback given is already processed, yes or no, and he can approve or reject the new policy. Let's go over my solution. So this is my application. I'm going to log in with a policy owner, so someone who creates policies. And in the home screen, I have an overview of all the active policies. I also have the search ability. So if I want to look for something about diversity, I type diverse and I have all those policies. If I want to have something to do with cybersecurity, I search for it and I find the policy here. So Lane, the user I authenticated with, is the owner of the policy. This is the most recent version of the policy. There has been a 1.0 and a 1.1, both approved. Let's create a new version of the policy. I'm going to select a certain date. My version number will be 1.2. Purpose, scope all remains the same, but for password management, we require two-factor authentication, for example. So I added the 2FA here. Let's create the new version. The new version has been created. I can offer feedback. So added the two-factor authentication, for example, and the feedback is shown here. Also, other users can add feedback. You see that the policy is still under review, so I'm gonna log out and I'm going to authenticate with Cinda, and Cinda is an approver, as you can see here. So Cinda sees there are 4 new policy versions that require review, and the 1.2 is one of them. So again, I have my 1.2 policy version. The most recent version is over here, and I can update the status. But first of all, I need to do some checks, and there are some approvals. None of them are checked, all of them are missing, but I'm going to add them one by one. So yes, the legal team has reviewed it. Yes, we follow all the standards. Yes, the history is documented, and so on. So all the approvals has checked. There are 2 feedback items. Shouldn't we introduce something? We did it, so it's processed. This one is also processed. And now I see no objection to say, hey, this policy has been approved. So we update the status. And if we go to the home screen and check the security policy, well, we notice that 1.2 is the most recent version. So this is what we are going to build. Let's start with the building. And how will we start with it? Well, we do it in 2 steps. First of all, I want to require all the functionalities, group them in pages, and see how the pages connect with each other. And once we've done that, we're ready to start with the application. But first, my functionalities. I have 3 types of functionalities. I have data that I want to show for multiple records. For example, I want an overview of all the policies. I want an overview of all the versions. I want an overview that policies that I own, and so on. So those are multiple records that I want to show. I also have cases where I want to show a single record, being the details of a single policy, the details of each version. And I also want to do some data manipulations with actions. I was able to add a new version, I was able to add feedback, and I was able to approve one. So this is what is needed in the application. It's very important to determine this at the start when you start building. It doesn't mean it can change afterwards, but it's good to have this as a starting point. Next, I'm grouping the functionalities into pages, and a page should at least have one functionality, but also a maximum of 5 functionalities. Otherwise, there are too many things on a single page. If you have more than 5 things, think about splitting it up over multiple pages. So I will have a home page with all my policies. I will have a policy details page with the details of one policy plus an overview of all my versions. In the version details, I have the details of the version, an overview of all the feedback, possibility to add new feedback. So I have multiple functionalities for a page. And as you can see, I have 7 pages in total. Now I start to define the links between the pages. So actually from all pages, I should be able to go to home. For my version approval, I can go there from my policy details or my versions to approve. There are actually 2 options here. Adding a new version only possible from policy details or the policy version details. And the final step is setting the parameters between the pages. So in my home page, I will add a search. We go into that later. Policy details, well, to be able to show the details of a policy, I need an ID. Also for the policy version details, I need the ID of the exact version. To show all my policies, well, I don't need any ID over there. So now that we have determined what we are going to build, we can actually start with the building. The best way to start with a new application is starting from a template. We have 2 templates for an application, and actually those templates have no functionality, they just have a certain theme. I'm gonna pick the Baserow theme using this template to install it. It comes with a database, but let's remove this one, and it also has a default page with some examples. I'm also gonna remove the default page. I'm gonna add a new page. It's gonna be my home page. And the path will be the root of my application. So just a slash to indicate that it is the root of my application. I added the page. As you can see, I have by default the multi-page header and multi-page footer from the template. Let's remove the footer and I will adjust the header. So the header has a menu. Let's remove it. And I'm going to add a text element. And inside the text element, I will show the username followed by the role of the user. We come back to that later when we go to authentication, but then we already have this on all our pages. This is my first page. Let's create a second page for policy details. And as I indicated in the introduction, policy details needs a parameter, being the ID of the policy. So I'm going to put a slash here, followed by a colon, and then I can set ID, and it automatically, because of the colon, recognizes that this is a parameter. I'm going to set it as a numeric parameter, and personally I don't like the name ID, because ID can refer to a lot of things. It's a policy ID, so I will call it policy, let's avoid the typos, policy underscore ID. And this is my details page. Let's add a heading saying details page, and maybe on the home page let's add a heading saying policy management application. Next page is to add the new version. Add new version. Notice that the path is automatically set and that all spaces are removed by dashes. This is because in the URL you cannot have a space. It says it's an invalid character. And I need 2 things here, 2 parameters. First of all, I want to have the policy ID to know to which policy the version belongs. And I also want to have the current version ID. So now you see why I don't like ID as a name on its own, because policy ID tells me much more. A policy ID and the current version ID is required. A policy to know to which policy the version has to be added, and the current version, the current active version, well, I'm going to use it to already pre-fill a little bit of my form. let's publish the application, or maybe first setting a header here at new version. I publish the application, but before it can be published, I need a domain. Let's call it how to policy.localhost because I'm running this on a local instance. If you're running this on SaaS, you will have the possibility to select baserow.site from the menu. I'm going to create it. I'm going to publish it. And once it's published, I go to my home page. If I add policy details here, it will return page not found because I expect an ID. So if I say /1, then it goes to my detail page. I don't want everybody to be able to access my pages. So in the next step, I'm going to set up some authentication. First of all, I go to my application. So let's rename it to policy management, that it has a proper name. And I'm going to open the settings. In the settings, I have a section users, and I'm going to add a user source. And a user source, well, this is just a collection of email addresses with passwords that I allow access to my application. So it will be a Baserow table authentication from a local database, and I'm going to offer access to my employees. Now I need to set a database, going to be my policy management database, and I will get the data from my employees table. So let's temporarily save this table or save this user source and have a look at the employees table. What I have here is an email address, a picture, a user role, and as a hidden field, I have a password. By default, the password is set to template for all the records. And as you can see, it is hidden. I can change it, but there's no way for me to read it. So user passwords are stored encrypted into Baserow. So this is my table structure. Let's go back to my settings, to my users, and configure them. The email field, well, is my email address. Name is my name field. And the job or the role field is the user role. And I'm going to authenticate with the email password combination, and I select my password field. If you have a single sign-on or you use OpenID in your organization, it's also possible to use other forms of authentication. So now I have my user source configured, 24 users are found, and I'm going to create a new page, being the login page. Adding the page here. And I also going to do some other settings in the settings of my application. First of all, in the general tab, I will indicate what my login page is. Well, actually the login page. This means if someone tries to access another page and the user is not authenticated, he will be redirected to that login page. And on my login page itself, I'm going to add an element, being the login form. I select my user source employees and my label will say sign in. I can do some styling. For example, I make it a small form. I'm going to offer it a background color, being my border color, for example. I can also do other kinds of things like setting the padding a little bit so that left and right I have more spacing. So if a user is authenticated, the username and role will be filled in at the top of my page. But for the moment, all pages are just accessible. Like my home page, everyone can access my home page. I want to prevent that, and that's possible with the page settings. I go to the visibility and I say, okay, only logged in visitors are able to visit this. I'm going to do the same for my policy details. Visibility, it's only accessible for my logged in visitors. Adding a new version, well, that's only possible for users that have the access role of being an owner. So I set logged in users, not all the roles, but only the ones that are owners. And this is what is set in my employees table with the user role. I have approvers, those that can approve policies. I have owners that write policies, and I have the others. So only only the owners are able to create a new version of a policy. And I can not only set this on page level, I can also do this on element level. For example, my detail page, I'm going to add a hyperlink that is styled as a button. The text is create new version. I want to navigate to my add new version page. Just gonna pass the number 1 2 times. We adjust this later. And I want this button or this hyperlink only to be visible for certain users, being users that have the role of owner. So let's publish the most recent details. As long as they're not published, they are not publicly available. I have my policy details here. I'm going to refresh the page and automatically it says, okay, authentication is required, and I am redirected to my home page. So I'm going to authenticate with Lane, and Lane normally should have the owner permissions. As you can see, Lane is an owner. I can click the create new version page. Okay, so now I have set up my user authentication. I miss one more thing, being able to log out. So I'm going to add a button here, adding an event to my button, and this event is that I want to log out. Also put a text over here. I publish my update. I just refresh the page here, and now I'm able to log out. When I log out, I'm automatically redirected to my login page. And here you can see it tried to go to my add new version page. If I now authenticate with Cinda, for example, and Cinda is an approver, it's not an owner. I want to sign in, and this don't work because I go to the add new version page. So if I just go to my login page and I try to sign in with Cinda, then it should be possible to go to my homepage. I didn't redirect it to the homepage. There's no redirect, but you can see Cinda here is logged in. So if I now try to go to to policy details /1, I must have made a typo somewhere. Yeah, the /login must be cut out. Policy details, well, I see my user, I see the logout button, I see the detail page, but I don't see the button to go to my new version. Now that we have implemented authentication, let's focus on building the home page. On the home page, I want to see an overview of all my policies, and I want to have the search functionality. Let's first create a data source that shows me all my policies. So the action will be, I want to see multiple rows. I offer it a name being all active policies. I create a data source from my policy management database. I pick the table policies, and I only want to see the published policies. There's no need in showing policies that are not published yet. I don't want to do any filter sorting or searching yet, so I save this, and I'm going to visualize it in a repeat element. I also have the possibility to do it in table element, but a repeat element offers me a bit more styling possibilities. I select my data source, and now I can add elements. The first element will be a hyperlink where I show the name of my policy, and I will navigate to my policy details page, passing the ID of my data source. And ID and index are not part of my table, but they are available on all data sources. So if I have a look here at my policies table, the number you see here on the most left side is the unique ID for each record. It's an ID set by Baserow, and it is always guaranteed to be unique. I go back to my homepage here. So I pass this ID to my policy details page. And here in my homepage, I'm going to add a columns element. I want to have 4 columns. And in each column, I can show a text element with, for example, the active scope, a text element with, for example, the active purpose, and so on. Now I want to filter my repeat element, and actually I can use the user actions over here. So I can say you can search, for example, based on name and keywords, or I can filter, for example, on a certain name. I can sort on category and so on. This is possible, and it adds buttons to the top of my page. Let's do a quick publish of my application. Going to the home page here. And you can see all my policies, and I can filter them, sort them, or search them, just like I would in the database. But I don't want to have these options. I want to build my own search form. So let's disable all of this, and let's add a new form. I'm adding a form. I'm going to style it a little bit so that it's a small form with a background color so that it stands out a little bit. And I'm going to add a input field, just a plain text field. The label will be search. It is a required field, and to pass the value, I will use a query string parameter. So let's go to the page settings, and we already discussed the path parameters. Path parameters are required. You have to set them. Just like I showed with the details page, if you don't set an ID, well, you get a page not found message. So it's not an option to do this, because if I don't set a search parameter, then it would just not work. It would return the page not found error. So what I did here is adding the query string parameter, search. It will be a text, and this is an optional one. So if I don't set it, then nothing happens. If I set it, I can use it to filter. So the default value, well, the default value will come from my search parameter. So if this parameter is not set, my field is empty. If it's set to cyber, it will show cyber. I also need to adjust my data source because I want to implement the search, and it has to search based on the parameter passed to the page. And I have to set an event. So you can see the exclamation mark in red. It means that no event is yet added, or no action is added to the submit event here. So I want to open the page. I open my home page again, and I'm going to pass the value of my form here. So let's publish it again. And let's test this. So instead of using the filter, sort, and search here, I'm going to search for cyber. I click submit. It refreshes my page, and it only gets my cybersecurity policy. I can also adjust the URL. If I want to have something with diversity, I add it here. It's automatically adjusted in my form, and I have my policies here. If I click on it, I go to my details page, but instead of just setting details page, I want to have all the details. So let's go back here. And in my policy details, I'm going to set a data source, and my data source will now get a single record. Namely, it will get my policy details. I will select my policy table, all my policies, and the row ID is my policy ID parameter that I'm passing. And the reason why it asks for an ID is because I said I want to have a single row instead of multiple rows. And a single row is always based on a certain ID. So now instead of details page, I can simply set, I want to have my policy details. I want to have the name element, and I can add other elements. So if I add the text field here, I can say I want to have the active purpose, the active scope, and so on. My social media use is not published yet, so let's test another one, the anti-harassment policy. This one already has an active purpose. I publish my application once again. I refresh my page, and here you see ID number 12 is this policy. I go back to my home page. I don't have any parameters set, but it works fine. My search box is just empty. Whistleblower policy fills in all the details. I did a quick fast forward in the application, but the functionality remains the same. So I still have my active policies with the search box. I just filled in all the details here. So after creating the data source, I select all the elements from my data source, and I have a table here with the multiple versions of a policy. I want to focus now on adding a new version. So this is the page we already created. I have added a form with some text fields, with a date picker field, a text field, just like we did with the search box, one for the purpose, one for the scope. And if you have a look here in my data sources, I have two data sources. I have one for my version details. So this is a single record I'm getting from my versions table. And I also want to have my compliance levels. And the compliance levels, those are the consequences for violating a policy. And when I create a new version, I want to be able to select a consequence. So what I need to do here, after my purpose, scope, guidelines, I'm going to add a new field, and it will be a record selector. My record selector requires the data source. I'm going to select my compliance levels, and I will offer it a label being compliance. I'm going to set it as required. There's only a single value I can select. To select a value, the one of the current version, I'm going to my version details. I look at the compliance field. There will only be one compliance, so I pick the first one and I select the ID field. So I see that at this moment it is low. Let's change the parameters here. So I go for policy 5 and this is version 28. So policy 5 is my cybersecurity policy and the 28 is the most recent version, the 1.1. So as you can see, my version number and all is already filled in and my compliance is also set. If I want to create a new version, I'm going to make the adjustments and clicking the button will fire the submit event, and I'm going to add 3 actions. My first action is that I will create a new record. I select my integration, my database, and I will create the new record in the versions table. The policy, well, I pass it as an ID. The version number, I pick it from my form, just like the purpose, my scope, the guidelines, those are all fields from my form. My compliance, the status will be set automatically. Let's have a look for my versions. So it will automatically become under review. Let's go back here. Let's go back to my actions. So status must be under review. The date will come from my date field, just here, and version approvals and feedback, I don't need to set it, so I can disable them. Yep. So this will create a new record. I also want to offer some feedback to my user, show a notification that it is a success, that a new version has been added. And finally, I want to redirect my user. I'm going to open a page, my version details page. So policy version details page, and the ID, well, it will come from the row I just created. I can pick the ID from here. So if I just created the row, the new ID is already accessible. So let's publish my application. Yeah, because I restored it, I need to add a new domain. So let's quickly type how to policy.localhost. Let's create it and publish the application. I'm going to open it and I'm going to authenticate with an owner because only owners can have a new policy. Check the cybersecurity. I want to create a new version. So those are the IDs that I have passed. I'm going to select a date. I have my compliance that I can select over here. I can make the adjustments. So we need two-factor authentication and here add it two-factor authentication. Okay, let's create a new version. It says it's a success and it redirects to the new page where I can add feedback here. And the feedback appears over here. Let's do a double check in the database. If I have a look here at my versions table, Well, my cybersecurity policy, I forgot to update the version number. So actually this should be 1.2, but it has my change description of adding two-factor authentication. Final step is implementing the approval process. But before we begin with the approval process, let's have a look at two tables. There is the table with approval criteria, and this table contains 7 criteria that a version must apply to in order to be approved. So it is related to a table version approvals, and version approvals every time matches a policy version with an approval criteria. So for example, this one has 7 records, 7 times the same policy, 7 times a different approval criteria, and I set a checkbox approval to true. I also have a formula field here that gives the row ID for each version. So in my versions table, I have an additional field here, row ID. It's a formula field. Formula is row_ID, and it returns the unique ID for each version. In my approvals, well, I have a formula field that picks the first row ID for a version. It only has one, but using the minimum function ensures that it is a number instead of a lookup field. So what I want to do now in my application is for the version approval page, I want to have 2 tables. I want to have one with all the checked approvals, and I want one with all the missing approvals. So the combination of both tables should always be 7 records. Let's start with creating the data sources. So my first data source will have multiple records, and it will be the missing approvals. So the ones that are not there yet. I'm going to select my database. I'm going to select my approval criteria table. That's the table with the 7 records. I don't want to select any specific view. And the filter I'm going to set is my version row ID. Well, it doesn't have, let's look for the doesn't have a value equal to the parameter of the version ID that I have passed. So for the 7 records, let's save it for a moment. Approval criteria. The ID of my version should not be available in this field. So that's the first data source I was adding. Let's do the second data source. So not only the missing approvals, but also the accepted approvals. Again, it will be multiple records. Set accepted approvals. I'm going to select my policy management database again, and this time I'm going to check the versions approval table. Check them all. And I'm going to set a filter where my version row ID, well, it must be exactly the ID of the version that I've passed. So checking again my database, version approvals, here this version ID, well, it must be an identical match. So I see here, for example, for record 28, so the version with the 28, the cybersecurity 1.1 policy. Let's do a quick check here. So I know it is policy ID 7, version 28. Okay, let's add tables. So the checked approvals, I'm going to add a table and I'm going to say, okay, those are the accepted ones. The only thing I want is the approval criteria. So let's remove all the other fields. And for my missing approvals, I'm going to add a table element, and those are the missing ones. And actually the only thing I want to have is the name. I'm going to remove the 2 other fields. So I told you the sum must always be 7. Yes, I have 3 things that has been checked, and I have 4 that has been missing. Now I'm going to add buttons. So for my approval criteria, I'm going to add a field. Let's call it delete, because I want to delete it from the checked ones. this is going to be a button, and the label will be -delete. I can do some styling. So I click this styling button. I'm going to do the button, and yeah, instead of the default blue color, I'm going to offer it the red error color. You can define any color you want here. So clicking this button will delete it. On the other side, I'm also going to add a field, and this will also be a button. But this time the button will, of course, add one of the missing approvals to the checked approvals. And again, I want to have a nice color here. And this time I want it to be the success color. So let's select success as the color for the button in all states. So I have my buttons over here. Of course, I want something to happen when I click the button. Let's start with the delete. So now I have the events tab here. It shows, okay, what happens if you click delete? Well, if I click delete, actually it's pretty simple. I'm going to delete a record, and I'm going to delete the record from my versions approval. Yep. So I have the versions approval table over here. It is the table with all the records. And if I click my delete button, then I'm going to delete that specific element. So the row ID will be the ID of my data source. The problem is clicking this, that nothing will visually happen on my screen. So I need to do two more things. I need to refresh the data source, and I want to update the missing approvals so that the record is added here. And I'm going to refresh another data source, namely the accepted approvals, so that the record is removed here. On the other side, I need to add an action to the click event of my add button. So again, I want here to create a record for a local data source. It will be a record in my versions approval table. The policy version will come from the version ID I'm passing to this page. The approval criteria, it will be the ID of the criteria. And approved, well, just to make sure that the checkbox is on, I will set this to true. And of course, not forget to make sure that the user gets a visual update. I'm going to update the missing approvals and also refreshing the data source of my accepted approvals. So let's publish the page. And let's do a quick test. But yeah, first of all, I need to log in with a different user, because Lane is a owner of a policy. I need Cinda because she is an approver, and only approvers are able to go to the approval page. So this is for my approval check. I have some missing approvals. I click the add button and it switches column. So refreshing the data source, this ensures that I have a live update here. If I delete one, it goes back here. If I add one, it goes to the other side of the table. And also, well, let's just check everything. Let's say that I have processed all the feedback. Well, now I'm able to just approve my version. Well, it was already approved, but I can update the status to approved, and I have a new version of my policy.